Throughout history, there have been numerous sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena around the world. Some of which, according to UFO researchers and enthusiasts, are believed to be the earliest reports of UFO sightings. While many of these sightings have been explained as hoaxes, hallucinations, or misidentified objects and phenomena of human or natural origin, others remain shrouded in mystery. In this series, I cover UFO cases that predate the 1947 saucer craze, and the birth of the modern UFO phenomenon. I also shed light on forgotten and obscure UFO history and literature that is unknown to most people, and rarely discussed in UFO circles nowadays. All the sources of information and research presented in my videos are in the description below. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. The 19th century was a period of rapid industrialization and significant technological advancements that had a profound impact on society, economy, and daily life. This century was also marked by a vast increase in scientific education and the encouragement of curiosity towards all the phenomena of nature. Astronomical phenomena were reported with greater enthusiasm and in more abundance than in previous times, due to the change in the standards of journalism, and the increasing demand for escapism and instant news, as well as the renewed fascination for the exotic and the unknown. Because of this, the press exploited people's interests and concerns for the sake of sales. Claims of alien encounters and UFO crashes were first made in this century, and by the late 1800s, the press would be full of articles speculating on what extraterrestrials might look like, and whether their airships had already made the journey across interstellar space to meet us. The idea that other worlds might be inhabited by alien civilizations became widely accepted by scientists, philosophers, and theologians in the Western world. On January 16, 1801, the Vice President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, received an intriguing letter from William Dunbar, a resident of Natchez, Louisiana. The report was sent to Jefferson in his capacity as President of the American Philosophical Society, an organization founded in 1743 that promotes knowledge in the sciences and humanities through research, professional meetings, publications, library resources, and community outreach. William Dunbar was an astronomer, naturalist, explorer, as well as a member of the society. He was a diligent investigator of natural phenomena in the lower Louisiana region, which at the time was still a Spanish territory. Dunbar's letter reads as follows.
A phenomenon was seen to pass Baton Rouge on the night of April 5, 1800, of which the following is the best description I have been able to obtain. It was first seen in the southwest, and moved so rapidly, passing over the heads of the spectators, as to disappear in the northeast, in about a quarter of a minute. It appeared to be of the size of a large house, 70 or 80 feet long, and of a form nearly resembling figure 5 in plate 4. It appeared to be about 200 yards above the surface of the earth, wholly luminous, but not emitting sparks, of a color resembling the sun near the horizon, in a cold frosty evening, which may be called a crimson red. When passing right over the heads of the spectators, the light on the surface of the earth was little short of the effect of sunbeams, though at the same time, looking another way, the stars were visible, which appears to be a confirmation of the opinion formed of its moderate elevation. In passing, a considerable degree of heat was felt, but no electric sensation. Immediately after it disappeared in the northeast, a violent rushing noise was heard, as if the phenomenon was bearing down the forest before it, and in a few seconds, a tremendous crash was heard, similar to that of the largest piece of ordnance, causing a very sensible earthquake. I have been informed that search has been made in the place where the burning body fell, and that a considerable portion of the surface of the earth was found broken up, and every vegetable body burned or greatly scorched. I have not yet received answers to a number of queries I have sent on, which may perhaps bring to light more particulars.
Unfortunately, the diagram referred to as Figure 5 is missing the plate page containing the drawing of the object. There were some attempts by researchers to find it, but without success. It's kind of strange that the plate, which would most likely be an accurate drawing of what Dunbar had observed, is nowhere to be found. There were no updates about the incident. Apparently, the search team found nothing at the crash site. At the time the letter was received, scientists were still debating the existence of meteorites. In astronomy, an asteroid is a space rock smaller than a planet that orbits the Sun. A meteoroid is a rocky or metallic fragment of an asteroid, comet, or planet. When a meteoroid or an asteroid enter Earth's atmosphere at high speed and burn up, they're called meteors. As to the fragments that survive the trip through the atmosphere and hit the ground, they're called meteorites. Their existence wasn't scientifically confirmed until 1803, when French physicist and astronomer, Jean-Baptiste Biot, reported the fall of a meteor near the town of L'Aigle, and found out after analyzing the rock, that it was from outer space. If Baton Rouge had been located in a more populated area where the terrain made investigations much easier, it likely would have been Dunbar, not Jean-Baptiste, who earned the recognition for contributing to the history of meteorites. However, it is believed that what Dunbar described, if accurate, was not a meteorite. An object the size of a large house, entering Earth's atmosphere at a speed typical of objects falling to Earth from space, would have left a much larger trace, and would almost certainly have killed the observer and anyone else near the impact area. Dunbar's estimate of the object size, if it was on fire, was probably not so accurate. The most we can say is that it was no larger than a house. In turn, if it was a house-sized object coming in at a meteoric speed, it would have been a catastrophic event, with no survivors for miles, and lots of destroyed trees and houses. Moreover, there should have been a sonic boom in addition to the sound of impact. In conclusion, if the object was the size of a house, it crashed at a low speed. And if it was a meteor, it was not the size of a house. On June 18, 1812, a war broke out between the United States and the United Kingdom over trade restrictions, maritime issues, and the British policy of impressment. It was a significant military conflict, with profound consequences for both nations, which played a crucial role in shaping the future of North America. In 1813, something strange happened. Two intriguing reports emerged during the war, describing sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena along the east coast of the United States. The veracity of both incidents remains controversial among researchers to this day. "13 years after the Baton Rouge incident, Thomas Jefferson received another report on July 31, 1813, describing the sighting of a bizarre fireball near Portsmouth, Virginia. This time, however, it was one of the strangest pieces of correspondence he ever received. The eyewitnesses were Edward Hansford, a Virginia tavern keeper, and his friend, John L. Clark, a Navy veteran and sea captain from Baltimore. They didn't know Jefferson personally, but wanted his opinion about the extraordinary phenomenon they had recently observed, on the night of July 25, 1813. The letter reads as follows.
"We the subscribers most earnestly solicit that your honor will give us your opinion, on the following extraordinary phenomenon. On the night of the 25th instant, we saw in the south, a ball of fire, full as large as the sun at meridian, which was frequently obscured within the space of 10 minutes by a smoke emitted from its own body, but ultimately retained its brilliancy and form during that period, but with apparent agitation.
So far, this sounds like it could be a meteor, or maybe a case of ball lightning. Then, things start to get weird.
It then assumed the form of a turtle, which also appeared to be much agitated and as frequently obscured by a similar smoke. It descended obliquely to the west and raised again, perpendicular to its original height, which was on or about 75 degrees. It then assumed the shape of a human skeleton, which was frequently obscured by smoke, and as frequently descended and ascended. It then assumed the form of a Scottish Highlander, arrayed for battle and extremely agitated, and ultimately passed to the west, and disappeared in its own smoke.
To this day, we don't know whether Mr. Jefferson ever responded to the witnesses. But, one thing is clear. If this story is not some kind of a joke on Mr. Jefferson, then what we have here might be the earliest recorded observation of a UFO in the state of Virginia. The description of the events, if true and accurate, indicate that the witnesses encountered something truly anomalous and out of the ordinary. In my opinion, if this was some kind of non-human intelligence, it seems that it was trying to communicate with the witnesses through the use of symbolism. The skeleton, as well as the Scottish Highlander, could very well be related to the war. As to the turtle, it's a popular symbol for many cultures, and is a sign of good fortune, wisdom, healing, and protection. Perhaps the shape-shifting entity was trying to convey a message about the outcome of the 1812 war. Other researchers proposed a different explanation regarding what happened that night. They speculate that the witnesses did see something in the sky, possibly an astronomical or meteorological phenomenon, but believe that the shape-shifting behavior was possibly the result of alcohol-induced hallucinations. Unfortunately, we don't know how credible the witnesses were. Plus, we don't have detailed information about the circumstances of the sighting, which means we'll never be able to come to a definitive conclusion regarding what really happened that night. Whatever happened on the night of July 25, 1813, over Portsmouth, Virginia, remains a mystery to this day. In 1813, Captain Stephen Decatur, renowned for his victories in the Barbary Wars, and for capturing the British warship Macedonian, was sent on a mission by U.S. Secretary of the Navy, William Jones, to draw off British blockaders along the eastern seaboard, by disrupting British commerce in the West Indies. Decatur sailed out of New York in June 1813. His squadron consisted of the frigate USS United States, the warship HMS Macedonian, and the sloop of war USS Hornet. The mission's progress was halted when the squadron encountered several British warships near Block Island and Montauk Point. With no room to maneuver, Captain Decatur ordered his ships to flee up the Thames River and seek refuge in New London's harbor, protected by Fort Griswold and Fort Trumbull. However, New London, being a Federalist stronghold, resented both the war and Decatur, as they brought economic hardships for the city and the nearby areas. New Londoners treated Captain Decatur not as a hero, but with scathing remarks implying cowardice and deceitfulness, and refused to follow his orders. Captain Decatur tried to order Connecticut's militia commander, Uriah Isham, to reinforce the old forts, but he refused. Then, when a U.S. Army general arrived to oversee New London's defense, Isham disbanded the militia. Decatur ended up building his own fort upriver, and thoroughly disliking New Londoners. For over 6 months, Decatur and his men remained stuck 5 miles upriver. As winter approached, Decatur devised a daring escape plan for his ships to slip through the British blockaders. He would take advantage of the dark overcast sky and lack of moonlight on the night of December 12, as the conditions would provide him the necessary cover of total darkness to make his run. The day came. Under the cover of darkness, several guard boats cautiously guided Decatur's warships out of New London's harbor. As he was about to begin his attempt, one of the watchmen aboard HMS Macedonian whispered to an officer that he spotted two mysterious blue lights on the banks of the Thames River, one near Fort Trumbull and another one near Fort Griswold, in Groton. The crew of USS Hornet confirmed seeing the same thing as well. The lights remained visible for over 2 hours, between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock, and were behaving in a particular way, as if they were sending a message to someone. Captain Decatur then became furious, and ordered his ships to turn back upriver. He believed that New London's anti-war Federalists had conspired to help the British capture his ships, and that the blue lights were signals communicated from shore by treasonous Federalists to alert British warships of his squadron's presence, and foil his escape. Decatur's ships would remain in the harbor for the rest of the war, and in April 1814, his men dismantled the vessels, and Decatur returned to New York by land. A few days after the Blue Lights incident, the whole affair was made public. Captain Decatur told his story to the editor of the New London Gazette, and to the Navy Secretary. On January 9, 1814, the mysterious lights reappeared again on the banks of the Thames River, and were seen by multiple witnesses in New London and Groton. The lights appeared around the same time as the first incident, and remained visible for the same amount of time as well. The Gazette's January 24, 1814 report from Washington dramatically described the lights as the torches of treason and condemned the traitorous actions. Suspicions arose regarding who was responsible for these signals. One theory implicated Elizabeth Stuart and her husband, British Consul James Stuart, whose palatial home was not far from the harbor. They allegedly acted as spies, passing information to the British fleet through a network of agents in New London. However, no proof was found to back up these claims. Feeling indignant, New Londoners responded, saying that the blue lights probably came from innocent fishermen, or were the reflections of stars on the water. Others said that Decatur made up the story to excuse his failure to escape the blockade. Connecticut representatives and members of the Federalist Party, Lyman Law, and Jonathan Moseley, pushed for a congressional investigation to clear up the matter and salvage New London's reputation. In the end, despite the support from Mid-Atlantic and Southern congressmen, the motion to launch an inquiry was suspended, with some congressmen dismissing it as insignificant. The incident tainted the Federalist Party, as its members were soon labeled derisively as Blue Light Federalists because of their anti-war stance and advocacy for peace with the United Kingdom. The incident also contributed to the rapid demise of the party's political leverage. Following the War of 1812, a position of power the party would never regain. No one ever established who flashed the mysterious blue lights from shore, or even if there had been any blue lights on the shore those nights. To this day, the truth behind the blue lights of 1813 remains a subject of debate among historians and researchers. Chimney Rock. A high stone outcropping, located in Rutherford County, near the city of Asheville, is one of the most widely known natural features in North Carolina, largely because of the persistent advertising that was given to it over the years, and because of the large number of people who have visited it, photographed it, and spread its fame around the world. Chimney Rock lies in the Hickory Nut Gorge, a 14-mile-long canyon that cuts a picturesque pass, as deep as 1,800 feet, through the Blue Ridge Mountains. Besides being known as a tourist attraction, the mountain was also the site of one of the oddest series of events ever recorded in the state. According to the native people in the area, the Cherokee and the Catawba, the Hickory Nut Gorge is a sacred place. The land beyond the stone pillar of Chimney Rock was called Suwalinuna, and was inhabited by mythic creatures and spirits, most notably, a species of benevolent humanoid beings, known as Yunwi Tsunsti, which means the little people. They possess magical powers, and are said to harshly punish those who are disrespectful or aggressive towards them. James Mooney, a 19th-century ethnographer, who recorded much of the Cherokee mythology and history, describes them as follows.
There is another race of spirits, the Yunwee-Tsunsti, who live in rock caves on the mountainside. They are little fellows, hardly reaching up to a man's knee, but well-shaped and handsome, with long hair, falling to the ground. They are great wonder workers, and are very fond of music, spending half their time drumming and dancing. They are helpful, and kind-hearted, and often when people have been lost in the mountains, especially children who have strayed away from their parents, the Yunwee-Tsunsti have found them, and taken them back to their homes. The little people do not like to be disturbed at home, and they throw a spell over the stranger, so that he is bewildered, and loses his way.
With the arrival of settlers at Chimney Rock around 1805, they began reporting a number of unusual sightings of strange mirages, apparitions, and close encounters with ghosts, UFOs, and all kinds of oddities, including an alleged aerial battle between armies on horses. The story that we are about to cover in this video is one of the many unexplainable incidents that took place in the area. On July 31, 1806, Patsy Reeves, a widow woman, claimed that at around 6 p.m., her 8-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, witnessed something bizarre while she was in a cotton field, about 160 feet from her house, which stands over 1.2 kilometers from Chimney Rock. It all started when Elizabeth told her 11-year-old brother, Morgan, that there was a strange man on top of the mountain, rolling rocks, and picking up sticks, adding that he wasn't alone, but with a group of similar people. At first, Morgan didn't take her claim seriously, but the little girl kept insisting that she saw him, and ended up persuading her brother to go and take a look. Upon arriving to the place where she was, Morgan saw not just one, but hundreds of people, flying through the air around Chimney Rock. The beings were of a variety of sizes, and all clad in brilliant white garments. Although they appeared to be generally human in shape, the children could make out no distinct features, and there was no clear differentiation in age or gender. The children then started calling for their mother, who joined them, along with her second daughter, Polly, as well as their neighbor, an African-American woman, who is unnamed in the original report. The crowd of beings appeared to rise off the mountain, south of Chimney Rock, and moved in a northern direction, towards the top of Chimney Rock. When a few of them reached the top, two seemed to rise together, and behind them, about 2 feet, a third rose. These three moved with great agility towards the witnesses, and resembled two men, of humanoid appearance. 3 more rose nearly from the same place, and moved swiftly in the same order and direction. After these, several others rose and went towards Chimney Rock. The sighting went on for about an hour, during which time, Mrs. Reeves sent a messenger to Mr. Robert Searcy. At first, he was reluctant to come, as he expected to see nothing extraordinary. But after a second messenger was sent to him, he finally agreed to come. Mr. Searcy said that while he was on his way to Mrs. Reeves's house, he glanced at the mountain, but saw nothing strange. A moment later, as he took a second look, he spotted multiple glittering human-like figures, of different sizes, and noticed that they moved in a semicircular course, between him and Chimney Rock. Several minutes later, the beings finally disappeared from sight. The witnesses said that they experienced general fatigue after the incident, but also felt a deep sense of delight. A report about the incident was made on August 7, 1806, and was presented to Mr. J. Gates, editor of the Raleigh Register and North Carolina Gazette, where it was first published the following September. The story was mentioned again in Edward Augustus Kendall's book, entitled, Travels Through the Northern Parts of the United States, in the years 1807 and 1808. So, what really happened that day? Did the witnesses really encounter something out of this world? Or is there a natural explanation for this incident? Is it possible that the paranormal stories surrounding the place were completely made up or heavily sensationalized and exaggerated by local newspapers, in order to turn the place into a tourist attraction, which would benefit the inhabitants of the area? Whatever the case may be, the truth behind the Chimney Rock apparition of 1806 remains a mystery to this day. The following UFO case was discovered by Russian ethnographer Alexander Nikolaevich Afanasiev, while searching the personal archive of a Russian politician in Moscow, in the 1850s. Alexander Nikolaevich Afanasiev was a historian, ethnographer, and folklorist, known for publishing one of the largest collections of folklore in the world. The collection was not strictly Russian, but included folk tales from Ukraine and Belarus, as well as Russian folk tales. The first edition of his collection was published in 8 volumes, from 1855 to 1867, earning him the reputation of being the Russian counterpart to the Grimm brothers. It all started in the 1850s, when Afanasiev developed a keen interest in Old Russian and Slav traditions and stories. Thanks to the help of the Russian historian, Konstantin Dmitrievich Kavlin, Afanasiev was able to get a place at Moscow's main archive directorate, under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Empire, and here, Afanasiev worked for the next 13 years. During that time, he met countless people of science and culture, and collected a lot of ancient books and manuscripts that formed a huge library. His articles, reviews, ethnographical and historical works, regularly appeared in the leading Russian magazines, newspapers, almanacs, and scientific periodicals. One day, Afanasiev stumbled upon an intriguing document, in the personal archive of a senator in Moscow, named Peter Semyonovich Polyadensky, who died in 1852. The 2 pages long document, whose author is unknown, tells the story of a mysterious aerial phenomenon that appeared over Moscow in 1808. The document is also accompanied by a sketch depicting the phenomenon, which looks like a rectangle-shaped object with a bright light on its right side. The witness who made this drawing was looking east. These are the 4 cardinal directions, and the line you're seeing here represents the north. The drawing also shows the chronology of the events, which went as follows. The phenomenon first appeared near the horizon, then moved towards the center of the city, until it was right above the Kremlin. It hovered for a while, then performed some maneuvers, before finally rising towards the sky, and disappeared after reaching a very high altitude. Researchers were able to identify the buildings in the drawing, and based on the perspective, it was determined that the witness who made this drawing was somewhere near the Pashkov House and the Borovitsky Hill. Here's the Kremlin Wall. This is the Cathedral of the Dormition, with the Patriarchal Chambers and the Church of the 12 Apostles next to it. This is the Ivan the Great Bell Tower. This is the Cathedral of the Archangel, and next to it is the Chudov Monastery, which no longer exists, as it was demolished in 1929. And this is the famous Spasskaya Clock Tower. Judging from the sketch alone, one would assume that the object was nothing more than a bright meteor. The description of the object's appearance and behavior, however, suggests otherwise. Here's the full text of the document.
On September 1, 1808, at 8:07 in the evening, a phenomenon appeared in the clear sky, incomparable in its beauty, as well as in radiance and size, to anything seen before. Its presence wasn't noticed until a loud cracking sound was heard in the sky. The phenomenon moved very rapidly in an arc-shaped path, from 55 degrees to almost 90 degrees, and stopped among some clouds over the Kremlin. It looked like a long straight-sided plate, some 9 arshin long, and half arshin wide. Then, on its front edge, turned to the southwest, an oval flame flared, some 2 arshin long, and 1.5 arshin wide, with a flame that can only be compared in its radiance to that of burning phosphorus. The phenomenon moved in a circular motion for over 5 seconds, while the flame's brightness illuminated everything around, like broad daylight. Suddenly, the flame went out, and the plate-shaped object smoothly went perpendicularly upwards, reached the stars, and remained visible for nearly 2 minutes. The object kept ascending, until it was no longer visible to the human eye, due to the extraordinary altitude.
Afanasiev ruled out the possibility of the document being a hoax, based on the spelling, punctuation, and presentation style of the text, as well as the age of the paper, which he found was made in 1805, at a paper mill, known as the Kaluga factory, whose owner was a merchant and industrialist, named Goncharov Abramovich. Afanasiev assumed that this was a draft of an article for a newspaper, but after doing some research, he couldn't find any mention of the incident in national newspapers. This remarkable incident had been forgotten for over 2 centuries, until the advent of the internet. Add to this, the growing interest in the UFO phenomenon, which led many UFO enthusiasts and researchers around the world to start searching for evidence of past alien visitations in old books and archives, which led to the rediscovery of this case. The Russian ufologists and astronomers who investigated the 1808 UFO sighting believe that the author of the document might have been a professor of chemistry at the Moscow Society of Naturalists, named Andrei Karatinovich Chebotarev. The evidence that supports this theory is the discovery of a note in the Society's archive, written on September 23, 1808, in which Chebotarev reported seeing a strange meteor-like phenomenon on September 1. However, the reason researchers can't declare with absolute certainty that he's the author is because upon comparison, his handwriting didn't match that of the person who wrote the document. Chebotarev might not be the author of the UFO document, but he was certainly one of the many witnesses of this unusual event. On September 12, 1816, the editor of the North American Review and Miscellaneous Journal received an interesting letter from a researcher in Boston, containing the translated report of a scientist, named Eric Icarius, describing in detail a mysterious aerial phenomenon that appeared over a small village in Sweden. Eric Icarius was a Swedish botanist who pioneered the taxonomy of lichens, and is recognized as the father of lichenology, which is the branch of mycology that studies the structure, physiology, and ecology of lichens. Mr. Icarius was also a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, and was regarded as a man of scientific eminence, whose name and reputation are well known. In May 1808, news began circulating about a remarkable and unexplained phenomenon that was observed by multiple eyewitnesses, in the small village of Biskopsberga, located near the town of Skanning, in the Östergötland county. At the time of the sighting, the village was the home of around 300 inhabitants, but today, it no longer exists. Mr. Icarius was informed about the incident and decided to visit the village, to investigate what happened. After interviewing the eyewitnesses and collecting their testimonies, Mr. Icarius proceeded to compare them with each other, in search of inconsistencies, but couldn't find anything that made him doubt the veracity of the story. The level of corroboration between the testimonies and their agreement on the details have left him baffled, and led him to completely rule out the possibility of the story being a hoax, or a case of collective hallucination. Mr. Icarius then wrote a detailed account of the incident, and presented it to the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, on July 15, 1808. The report was then translated into English by Mr. J. C. Hoff, and sent to a researcher in Boston, who then transmitted it to the North American Review for publication. The story goes as follows. On May 16, 1808, at about 4 p.m., during a hot and cloudless afternoon, the inhabitants of Biskopsberga, who were busy working on their farms, noticed that the sun shining over their village suddenly dimmed, turning into a dull brick-red shade. The phenomenon was first observed by a group of laborers, in the fields of a farmer named Peter Manson, before attracting the attention of the entire village. The sun lost so much of its brightness, that villagers could stare right into it, without feeling any kind of pain in their eyes. They also noticed that a very strong wind was blowing from the southwest. As darkness engulfed the small village, a large number of spherical objects, dark brown in color, and several inches in diameter, appeared from the western horizon, and seemed to be heading towards the sun. Then, as some of the spheres got closer to the sun, they changed their colors, from dark brown to black. What's even stranger is that some of the spheres reduced their speed, only to increase their pace again after passing in front of the sun, while most of the spheres remained stationary for a moment, before resuming their motion. When the objects passed by the sun, some of them began moving in a line formation, consisting of 3, 6, or 8 spheres, linked together by what looked like a thin and straight bar. As the objects increased their speed, they broke formation, and each sphere had what looked like a long black tail behind it, over 18 feet long. The tail was wider at its base where it connected to the sphere, and gradually decreased, till it ended in a fine point. Upon reaching the eastern horizon, the tails disappeared, and some of the spheres descended to the ground. One of the witnesses of this unusual phenomenon in the skies over Biskopsberga was Mr. Knut Gustav Wettermark, who was a respectable citizen and secretary of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. Not far from where he stood, one of the spheres fell down to the ground, and he managed to observe its behavior when it did. He noticed that just before the sphere touched the ground, its color faded away, and it looked like a soap bubble, which children produced from soap suds using a bubble wand. When he arrived at the area where the sphere had landed, Mr. Wettermark discovered a scarcely perceptible gelatinous film, which was as thin and fine as a cobweb. It was changing colors, before it quickly dried up entirely, and vanished without a trace. The strange phenomenon didn't stop there. For over 2 hours, new spheres appeared from the west, and subsequently disappeared when they reached the east, while displaying the same behavior. At one point, it became impossible to count the number of spheres, as there were millions of them in the sky, according to the estimations of the villagers. 2 hours later, the spheres stopped appearing, and the sun's brightness and color came back to normal. While interviewing the eyewitnesses, Mr. Acarius learned a peculiar detail about the objects that he found quite intriguing. He was told that the spheres maintained the same apparent size when they rose from the western horizon, as well as on their passing by the sun, and during the whole of their course to the eastern part of the horizon, where they disappeared. This is very bizarre, because when an object is progressing overhead through the air, from horizon to horizon, it changes range dramatically, and must obviously subtend a small angle when first seen, and when last seen, but will subtend a much larger angle when overhead. This suggests that the spheres were huge objects, very far away, possibly in outer space. If that was the case, the spheres would have been seen by thousands of people in multiple locations across northern Europe. Yet, no written records or reports describing the appearance of such phenomenon on May 16 were found elsewhere. After the end of the investigation, as well as the analysis and comparison of testimonies, Mr. Acarius proposed the following hypothesis as a possible explanation of the phenomenon. He speculated that a strong gust of wind from mountains or forests far away had collected and carried along with it vegetable substances of a jelly-like nature, which in passing through the air, incorporated some additional matter by a chemical union, and turned into globular masses, or by the effect of the air and wind, were formed into bubbles, which became perceptible to the eye by the sunlight. However, Mr. Acarius stated that there are several aspects of the phenomenon that the hypothesis fails to explain. For example, it doesn't explain why the sun lost its brightness and turned red. This detail immediately reminded me of solar eclipses. In order to verify whether a solar eclipse had taken place on that particular day, I consulted a Wikipedia page that listed all solar eclipses in the 19th century. However, my search yielded no results. The only solar eclipse that occurred in May 1808 was a partial one, which happened approximately 2 weeks after the incident, on May 25, and didn't affect Northern Europe. The hypothesis also doesn't explain some of the behaviors and maneuvers exhibited by the objects. Despite the strong wind, they moved slowly when near the sun, and faster when elsewhere in the sky, and appeared to be capable of consciously changing the course of their movement. The duration of the phenomenon, as well as the innumerable quantity of spheres that kept passing without interruption, is also anomalous. Mr. Acarius concluded his report by expressing his hope that the investigation of this case would be taken up by more knowledgeable scientists, who could determine the exact cause of this unique and never-seen-before phenomenon. What scientists didn't know at the time was that this wasn't an isolated case. Since the advent of ufology, several similar incidents have been uncovered, the most famous of which are the 1561 aerial battle of Nuremberg, in Germany, and the 1566 celestial phenomenon over Basel, in Switzerland. In the vast majority of the cases, the event always starts with the sun losing its brightness and turning red, while the sky becomes quite dark, similar to what one would see during a total solar eclipse, except that the solar disk remains unaffected, whereas during a solar eclipse, the moon partially or completely covers the sun's disk. Additionally, the event affects only a very small geographic area, indicating that it occurs at a very low altitude in the atmosphere, thus, it's most probably not an astronomical phenomenon. The darkening of the sky is accompanied with the apparition of a swarm of spherical objects, of unknown origin, which perform a variety of unusual maneuvers, before disappearing near the horizon. In my opinion, I think that what we're dealing with here could be a very rare and strange natural phenomenon, that science has yet to discover, only occurring under very specific circumstances. Whatever the case may be, the Biskopsberga sighting of 1808 remains unexplained to this day. On September 10, 1810, a remarkable incident occurred in the Dutch village of Brezeau, located near the Meuse River. The 36th volume of the Philosophical Magazine reported that between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m., a luminous meteor appeared in the south, about 2,900 feet from the village. People who attentively observed it assert that it was floating over the place where it was first seen, for over 15 minutes. During this time, it appeared as if multiple lights were gathering and uniting with the strange meteor, which gradually grew to become a very large globe of fire. The mysterious meteor then started moving north, approaching the village, and spreading terror among its inhabitants, who believed that their houses would be burnt, and that they themselves would perish. The globe was accompanied by a loud and terrifying noise, resembling the rolling of a rapid chariot at times, and sometimes resembling the noise of rain, driven by strong wind. The globe was also followed by a very thick fog, that carried up from the ground everything it met in its passage. In crossing a river, the globe absorbed water, which soon afterwards fell as rain. The globe wandered for some time near the village, before suddenly turning into a column of fire, which, with the fog, rose towards the sky. This made the villagers believe that the fog was smoke. The column then moved away from the village, and approached the forest of Beaulieu, where it remained stationary in the sky, for over 15 minutes, before suddenly disappearing, leaving a thick odorless fog behind. A moment later, it rained heavily, and loud thunderclaps filled the air. The bizarre phenomenon lasted over 45 minutes. Although no injuries or deaths among people or animals were reported, the globe resulted in the destruction of a house's roof near the village. It is difficult to imagine a natural phenomenon with these characteristics. It appears to display the behavior and characteristics of ball lightning and a tornado at the same time. Its duration is also an anomaly, since ball lightning has a maximum lifetime of only a few minutes, whereas the phenomenon lasted 45 minutes, before turning into a column of fire and rising towards the sky. In 1990, paranormal researcher Mark Chorvinsky reported on a story that was handed down to a lady named Lois Foster, through her great-grandmother to her grandmother, saying that 3 little humanoid beings from another world visited an Inuit village in Alaska in 1800. According to the great-grandmother, the beings came in a silvery-looking disc object that sailed through the air and landed in the remote village of Koyuk in Alaska. As to the grandmother, she told her granddaughter that she saw them during her childhood, in the early 1910s. Despite their short stature, the beings possessed great strength, and were able to lift heavy logs and dead deer without any help. It is said that they were stranded in the village because something was wrong with the disc, which prevented them from leaving the area. It is also said that the beings coexisted with humans for so long, that they ended up learning the native language and communicating with the villagers. To this day, nobody knows what happened afterwards, and the fate of the beings remains a mystery. There is, however, a writer by the name of Philip L. Rife, claiming that the 3 aliens died sometime in the 1910s, but the problem is that he's an unreliable source, because his books on paranormal topics are often full of outlandish and fake stories, plus, he doesn't provide the exact sources of his information. The overall credibility of the case, as well as the exact dates of the events, remain uncertain. The only undisputed element in this story is the existence of Lois Foster, which was confirmed by French UFO researcher, Patrick Rouse, who managed to find a picture of her in the Quad City Herald newspaper, for December 23, 1976. The article tells how she remembers Eskimo Christmas celebrations, but does not mention the UFO story. This at least confirms Foster's existence as a real person, and not a fictional creation. In my opinion, I think that the story is just a hoax, simply because of the complete absence of evidence to support the claims. These beings had allegedly been living alongside humans for more than a century, so you would expect to find lots of eyewitness accounts that corroborate each other, photographic evidence, and a lot of documentation in the form of records, diaries, newspaper articles, scientific reports, etc. But most importantly, a substantial body of tangible evidence, like biological material, spacecraft wreckage, as well as tools, artifacts, and all kinds of objects of non-terrestrial origin that belong to the aliens. Yet, the only evidence that we have today is a single second-hand testimony. In conclusion, what I think really happened is that the original story that was handed down to Lois Foster was nothing more than an Inuit folk tale about encounters with dwarfs, but was distorted either by her, or by Mark Chorvinsky, to fit the UFO lore. Jerome Clark, an American writer, specializing in UFOs and other paranormal subjects, shares a similar opinion, suggesting that the story is most likely a conflation of traditional Inuit beliefs in little people and UFO lore. For those who don't know, in Inuit folklore, dwarfs are a race of human-like beings of short stature, no bigger than a foot, others say no bigger than 3 feet. Despite their height, they possess magical powers, as well as supernatural strength and speed. They wear old indigenous Alaskan garbs, and supposedly live underground or inside mountains. They also bear a striking resemblance to other cultures' legends of fairies, dwarves, goblins, and leprechauns. Although they're usually harmless, unless provoked, the stories of the little people and their temperament vary greatly, depending on each tribe. During my research, I came across a book, titled A Treasury of Eskimo Tales, by Clara Kern Bayless, published in 1922. It contains 31 folktales gathered from the Eskimo living in North America. One tale in particular is almost identical to Lois' story. Both stories feature 3 beings, and focus on their incredible strength. In the Eskimo tale, the beings used a sledge as a mean of transportation, whereas in Lois' story, it was a disc-shaped craft. Moreover, both stories claim that the beings appeared in a village, and lived among its inhabitants for a long time. For me, this is the proof that the original story was distorted to fit the UFO lore, though it remains unclear whether this was done deliberately or not. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to show your support and appreciation for my work, consider donating via PayPal or Ko-fi. Your generosity will help me continue making more informative content for you. The links are in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.